Welcome to the Finding the Magic podcast, where books come alive. I'm Tricia Copeland, a fiction author and host of this show. If you love books, finding great reads, and hearing about the story behind the story directly from the authors, this is the place for you. Whether you like fantasy, science fiction, dystopian, or romance titles, I think you'll find something to love in my playlist. Listen in to discover something magical about a book or two today.
Welcome, Kristina.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. Today we have Kristina W. Kelly. She is author of Tavern Tale. And I don't know, have you written other books too, or is this your first release?
I have written other books, so it's my technically first release of a novel by myself because my first book I wrote with one of my best friends. So we have a series called the Etheria Cycle, which combines fantasy with sci-fi. And our first book released in 2023 called Trials of the Innermost, and it's a planned trilogy. And then my second book was a poetry collection, which I released in October of 2024. And it is fantasy, sci-fi, and science poetry paired with my photography. So Tavern Tale is my first actual novel all by myself. So I'm very excited about that.
Well, congratulations. And I think it comes out January 7th, 2025,
That's right.
right?
That's right. Yeah.
Well, where do you want to jump in? Do you want to jump in at the beginning of the story with your other series with your author friend, or do you want to talk about Tavern Tale first?
We can talk about Tavern Tale.
Okay. So I read a little bit of the blurb, but jump in and tell us what it's about.
Yeah, definitely. So Tavern Tale is a sapphic fantasy romance set in cozy autumn. So it's got a little bit of the vibes of maybe a Legends and Lattes with some cozy feel, but it's got some higher stakes. So the premise is, what if the side quest is the main quest? Because it's inspired by the RPG games that I play. Divine, she is a healer of the goddess of souls, and she's been chasing her talisman across half the continent. It's the source of her magic. Without it, she's powerless. She comes into a city and meets the tavern owner, Saf. And Saf offers to help Divine find her talisman if Divine will help her solve a mysterious quest in a chest. And so that's the premise. And that quest and the chest and everything is very pulled out of all the video games that I love with RPGs. And you find a quest, you get a random random side quest that you need to go on and solve the mystery.
And what world is this set in? Is it set in current day world, or is it your own world?
Yeah, it's my own world. So this book is going to be book one of a series called The Tales of Trelvania, and Trelvania is a fantasy world, and it's the main continent of the world.
Okay, and are we talking adult or young adult, or who is this for?
It's adult. The main character, Divine, she is 25, and the main love interest, she is 30.
Okay, so definitely adult novel. And what inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, so one day I was sitting around thinking about how much I love the video games I play, like Final Fantasy and Dragon Age and Skyrim, and how I'm this type of person who plays and I have to do all the little side quests. I have to go explore everything first before I go do the main story, because I'm always afraid that if I do the main story, I won't be able to come back and do all the fun little side things. And it just popped into my head. I was like, why don't I write a story like that? And so in the video game Skyrim, there's a scene really early on where you kind of walk into this, I'll just call it like a store. You walk into a store and these people are talking about their lost item, and they turn to you, the player character, and basically like, hey, we don't know you, but help us out. We'll tell you where our thing is and you go get it. And so that's what I really latched on to with the story. Is like, why don't I do that? So my opening scene in Tavern Tale is my main character, Divine, super tired after trying to chase after her talisman, sitting at the bar. And the bar worker just plops down this chest and says, I hear you're looking for an adventure. And Divine, our main character's like, you heard wrong. I'm not here looking for an answer. And that's where I went with the story. Was trying to embody a lot of those kind of side quest vibes, going off and exploring the town. So within Tavern Tale, the main characters take some time to just kind of do things around. And that's why it's got some of those cozy vibes. They go to a a fall market. They kind of look at all the wares and things. They eat honeyed nuts and such. And then meanwhile, of course, they're going to try to get Divine's magic back.
Fun. And so you said this is a series, correct?
That's right. Yeah, this is book one.
And how fast do you think those are going to come out, or where do you know what's happening next in the series?
Yeah, so I'm what I consider kind of a slow writer. So I have other projects going on. I'm writing the sequel to the one I hinted at with my co-author. Um, So it really depends on how things work. I've got a day job, I've got kids, and I try to sneak in as much writing as I can. With Tavern Tale, I actually set out to write it as a short story. Realized it was going to be way bigger than a short story, and I wanted to tell that tale. But I wrote that actually pretty fast, within maybe like a month's time. So I'm actually hoping that I'm going to take a month here at the beginning of 2025 and do the same thing with the sequel, so that maybe we can release kind of on the same schedule. Maybe January every year, I can release the next books in the series.
Fun. And you said it started out as a short story. How long is it now?
It is a little bit over novella length, so it's like 45,000 words.
Okay. Yeah, it's so interesting how different people view the length of books, because I was telling my author friend that I had a novella and it was 60,000 words. She was like, no, 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 that's not a novella. That's a full-length novel. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I've been calling it a novella this whole time.
Yeah, yeah. It's so strange too. Like you'll go look at the various I don't know, Wikipedia article or somebody's blog post, and they all have those different links. So what we've been going off of with my publisher is the Science Fiction Fantasy Association. They have awards and things, and so they have listed what the actual length is for them. And so that's where we've got, yep, okay, mine's a little bit over the quote their novella length. So I can't call it a novella. So I keep telling people it's a short novel or it's a quick read.
Well, fine. Yeah, those are good links. I feel like I just read one on a plane in like an hour, and I was like, this is perfect because I got the beginning, the middle, the end with, just between takeoff and landing. And then I could do my real work when we were able to use
Yeah.
the computers.
Yeah, I didn't really realize this type of length existed until after the birth of, I think it was my second son. My brain was just not focusing on long books, but I still wanted to read. And I stumbled upon Kingfisher's books. So she's written like Sword Heart is a fantasy romance. She's written um, What Moves the Dead, which is like an Edgar Allan Poe retelling. And a lot of her stuff is novella length. And I had absolutely no idea that that kind of speculative fiction, the fantasy, the sci-fi kind of stuff could be so small. And so that's kind of an inspiration too for me to release Tavern Tale, is having recently read some of those books and said, you know what, those worked really good and I really enjoyed them, especially for me who was a new mom, to still want to read and not have to read a really epic, super long book, and it still gave me the same kind of feeling. So it was really nice to find that kind of novella length stuff.
Neat. And it sounds like all your works are in the fantasy sci-fi genre. What inspired you to write in that genre, or why do you write in that genre?
Yeah, it's probably because for whatever reason, when I was young, I really gravitated towards those stories. So I was a big Star Wars fan, and then they came out with books in the what they call the expanded universe. So there's all these authors writing continuations of the Star Wars story, and I just gobbled those books up. I just absolutely loved reading those, and C.S. Lewis and Tolkien for fantasy. And I just found I really loved kind of stepping through the door and experiencing similar stuff to the real world, but in the fantastical setting. And that's what I really love. And I actually love blending stuff. So I mentioned like Trials of the Innermost is mainly fantasy because it's set with like magic and fantastical elements, but then it has sprinkles of sci-fi. And so I really like blending the things that I like. And like I mentioned with my poetry, it's got fantasy and sci-fi poetry in there. So I like to dabble in multiple genres, smush things together where I can, because I just love certain things, and like, why not mix it up? Let's make a new recipe and see how it tastes.
Fun. And did you create like a whole new magic world for Tavern Tale, or how does their magic world work?
I did, yeah. So I actually based my magic system off of deities. So the world is full of lots of gods and goddesses and temples. And the general population will go kind of pick a main god or goddess to worship, and that temple will then have more quote kind of like power, or they're kind of viewed as, well, this particular goddess has a lot of followers, they're kind of the more powerful goddess in the world. And then certain people are kind of have an affinity for magic, and those will choose to align themselves with a particular god and goddess, and that god or goddess will bless them with particular powers. So, Divine, she's devoted her life to the goddess of souls, and the goddess of souls helps take the souls after life and make sure that they cross over or get reincarnated later. But also, they look after the souls of the living too. So, there's a lot of healing abilities and emotional manipulation. Um, and so some of the other gods and goddesses, there's like a god of storms. So if you're a servant of the god of storms, you might be able to summon a little bit of lightning or a little bit of rain. And so I based it on kind of that deity aspect, versus a lot of other magic systems. I feel like mine's a little bit different there, since your devotion and kind of connection to some sort of god or goddess is what gives you your magic.
Right. Sort of what you're more attracted to is maybe your strengths, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
and is everybody's magic associated with the talisman or just your main characters?
Those who find that they have a magical ability, and want to devote themselves to a god or goddess, they go through a process where they create their own talisman. And this talisman binds them to what I call their magic well. And it's kind of a feeling where they can feel how deep of a magic pull they can pull from. And this talisman, what happens is there are other people in the world that want to steal them from you, because that's your source. It ties you to your magic well and how much power you have. So what they do is they create fake talismans. You always have to touch a talisman in order to be able to access your magic well. So like Divine, she's got a whole bunch of rings on her fingers. She's got necklaces. She's got belt buckles, so that nobody knows what your actual talisman is. That way they can't easily steal it from you.
Yeah, that's I haven't heard of a magic system like that. That's very unique, creative.
Thank you.
So where and you said you're gonna release the next book. Is it going to be does she find her or maybe you don't want to tell us if she finds her talisman in
Spoilers.
the first one.
It's definitely going to continue her story. Her story. The Tales of Travalia, excuse me, the Tales of Travania trilogy is going to focus on Divine and her story.
Okay, fun. And I think you're published with Space Wizard, is that correct?
That's right, Space Wizard Science Fantasy. It's a smaller publisher, but I absolutely love the name. It kind of, like I said, the blending there, Space Wizard. So you got your fantasy and sci-fi.
That's really fun. So tell me about your first book with your co-author.
Yeah, Trials of the Innermost is told from 6 points of view, which is a lot, and that's why our book is actually really long. It's almost 220,000 words, but because it's from 6 points of view, that's the best way we could get it to have good character arcs for all of them. It's set on a world that stops spinning, so you have a realm that's always in darkness, you have a realm that's always in light, and then there's this realm that's kind of in that gray between. Two representatives are chosen from each realm to kind of foster peace and learning across there, because in their past they've had war and battles. So this kind of Trials of the Innermost was set up kind of like a Hunger Games kind of thing. You choose two, and they go off on these peacekeeping adventures. But the twist is that one among them is actually harboring a alien darkness that is bent on devouring all the light from the planet. So not only do our six protagonists need to work together to keep peace on the world, they discover that they need to figure out how to save the world from this alien entity.
Ooh, yeah. So is it first person from each character's point of view?
It's third person. It's
Third
third
person.
person from all
Okay.
of them.
And
Yeah.
does it continue the story? I mean, are they like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then repeat again? And does it continue the story, or how does that work?
Yeah, the way we divide, like set up the chapters, is the story really figured out who was going to speak. So it may go where character 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6 go in a row, but sometimes it's 1 and 3 and 1 and 4. So just really whose perspective, what area tells it. So the story starts off in all their 3 different realms so that you get exposure to, well, what's the light realm like? Well, they pursue knowledge and they're always in the light. So they actually built their city inside of a canyon inside the rock, kind of like Petra, so that they're protected from the heat and the sunlight. And so you get this exposure to all the 3 different realms and the 2 characters from each. And eventually within the first, I don't know, 20% at least, they finally get together. And so then the story is told all together, but with those rotating perspectives of where they're going, what each person is thinking about the journey across the realms and their tasks that are set before them.
Fun. Yeah, I haven't co-authored with anyone, but I had an illustrated book who the illustrator was very, we were very much not created the whole story together, but it was really fun to be able to bounce ideas off another person and have the story grow that way instead of just like feeling like it was all in my head. And there was definitely a point where something didn't work and I sent it to them and they were like, yeah, you're right, this doesn't match the character. So we like figured out together how to get through that. Did you have that experience, or how do you write the different chapters?
Yeah, so I absolutely love doing collaborative work. That's one of my things that I like to do. So early on, me and my good friend Jonathan, we built all that backstory stuff. So we built out character bios, we built out the history of the world and the descriptions and everything. So we had this framework of how everything would work. And then we're both kind of exploratory writers, so we like to write and see what happens, but we gave ourselves the bigger arc. We knew that this is where the main points needed to be, and this is where we needed to finish. But all the little, like how we actually got to all of those points was a little bit more of like, we'll just write and see what happens. And so we kind of divided the 6 characters, and I mainly wrote from 3 of them, and he mainly wrote from 3 of them. And we would share what we've written. We'd add comments and things. And early on, we kind of felt like at the time, maybe he was better at dialogue and I was better at fight scenes. And so we would often just kind of leave ourselves placeholders, these brackets, and I would literally put in there, Jonathan, write the dialogue here. And he would say, spruce up the battle scenes. And so we would play to our strengths. And but we were always collaborating and talking about, well, what do you think about this? And where should we go with this part? And that was one of the great things I feel like with the collaboration is writing sometimes can be such a solitary experience, and you're just stuck in your head, and if you can't solve it, you almost could give up. Like it's just you. But with the collaboration, I could very easily just call up Jonathan and say, hey, I've gotten to this point. What do you think we should do here? I'm just really stuck. And hopefully, and most of the time he would have an idea to get us unstuck from my kind of writer's block. And that was a great thing where we could just trade off and like, I'm not feeling this character today. I can't get our bard to really shine here. Do you want to take the chapter? And so we would trade off and just play to the day to our strengths or whatever worked. And it was great. I feel like we were able to complete a task that maybe would have taken us a lot longer by ourselves. Maybe we would have given up. But we were able to finally get the whole thing finished.
Well, yeah, because 220,000 words. Yeah, I just finished my longest book and it was 125,000 words. My editor was like, "Oh my goodness, what are you doing?" So
Yeah.
but you would have to be really organized to work with another person like that. You would have to have everything mapped out and everything clear about who the characters and the world building, and you can, I guess if you wanted to change something, you would have to agree on what was being changed.
Yeah. We early on we created kind of almost like Wikipedia articles in our shared drive. And then we got to a point where we realized we would drop in phrases, like certain phrases maybe the dark realm uses, or certain phrases a character would use. And we would go, wait a second, didn't we use something here that was like a phrase that we should put in there? So we created what we call our records of words and phrases. So now we have a document that has all that. What are some of the specific words that only this realm use or this character, so that we can go back and not always go, hey, Kristina, what did we do like 3 chapters ago that maybe I should use now.
Fun. Yeah, I'm more like a writer, more like you. It sounds like I know the arc of my story, and then I just, I figure out how to get them there while I'm writing,
Yeah.
because that's the fun of
Yeah.
it for me. But my editor was
Yeah.
finally like, okay, you have to do an outline. So I do an outline after I write now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what we did, after the fact. We went back through and did, like, one of those more detailed outlines and made sure our story fit that. We're writing book 2 right now, and we did a little bit more of that plotting ahead of the time to help us to maybe not have so much edits that we'd have to do after the fact, but we're still writing it very much, exploratory. Jonathan came up with an idea the other day that neither one of us had on the page, but we were both like, "Whoa, this is really cool. Yep, let's do that." And it fits with everything we already did because we had all that background stuff. So we would know what the new stuff, if it could fit or not. It was just like a surprise. Oh, yeah, that definitely is very cool and makes sense. And let's do it.
Fun, yeah. Every once in a while, like I want to do something to break my rules, and then I'm like, okay, wait, it just is really break a rule, or maybe I can like get around this rule somehow.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Well, how did you get into writing? Just not your genre, but how did you start writing?
Yeah, I feel like I've always been a writer. I've always been a storyteller. I've got memories of being a kid and setting up my little stuffies around the room and telling them stories. And um, I know I've written stuff for a very long time. Of course, school always gave you projects, but I know I was always like really into that assignment. Like, yeah, I do want to write that story. And it just progressed and just kept growing and growing. And I would say high school was probably the biggest explosion. I got exposure to writing for like school magazines and things. And so I wanted to keep creating more poetry and I wanted to create more stories. But fast forward, it wasn't really until I met Jonathan and we talked about all of our interests and found out we both write stuff that one of us said, why don't we write together? And that was the first time that I finished a really large project, an actual book. I had written I don't know, 10 chapters here of one story and 10 chapters here of another, but never really finished an entire book to say, okay, I wrote a book. And I don't think I really thought about like all those books I've read. You could do that too, Christina. You could actually write a book and have people read it. Like I don't know that that really crossed my mind until I met Jonathan. And so that was the first time I finished the project. And it took us 10 years of writing, searching
Wow.
for agents, and finally we found a small publisher who focused on LGBTQ authors and stories that ours fit with, and they wanted it, and so that's why we got published then last year, 2023. But yeah, it was like a 10-year journey, but that I think gave me the confidence to say, I can do this and I can finish more projects. And so since then I've been writing more short stories and trying to submit them to magazines and like my poetry book and now Tavern Tale. So yeah, I would say in the last 10 years it finally like clicked. This is something I want to do and I want to really focus and get stuff done and out there for people to read.
That takes a lot of patience too to work on something for 10 years. I'm not sure I would have had the patience for that.
Right. The good thing is it was fun. It was a good experience for me and my friend and just something that we could do together whenever we wanted to. So I think it was part the fun that kept us going too.
Right, you were playing your own game and you're in writing your novel, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, fun. So tell us where we can find you and your books.
Yep, I have a website. It's christinaseyes.com. And then my books, you can find links there or almost anywhere online books are sold, including, of course, Amazon. And then you can also follow me almost on any social media, Christina W. Kelly. I'm very active on Instagram and TikTok and Threads right now, but you can find me pretty much everywhere.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for being here. And when you publish your next book, I hope you'll come back.
Thanks. Yes, definitely. I had such a great time. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Finding the Magic podcast. I'm your host, author and podcaster Tricia Copeland, and I love getting behind the scenes. If you like the podcast, make sure to subscribe and stop in each week to discover new authors and books. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep finding the magic.